Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Demonologist UK live stream here on the HAPRC network. And boy, have we got a show for you tonight. It's going to be absolutely amazing. We are joined by the one and only Dr. Cal Cooper tonight, but we're going to get to that. So hold tight, put your seatbelts on. It's going to be a bumpy ride tonight. Really looking forward to it. But don't forget, guys, we are back cataloguing all the shows. They're all available over there. If you want to go and watch any of my previous shows, they're all uploaded onto the Facebook page, www.facebook.com/Demonologist UK. Hit the videos tab. They're all there ready for you. And for all my YouTubers out there, I'm currently sitting on 31 subscribers, so I'm not very happy, but I want you guys to boost it up. If we get to 100 subscribers, I'm going to be putting out some special Demonology 101 videos for you guys. So if you want to get over on the YouTube, all you have to do, head over to YouTube. On the search bar, type the Demonologist UK and it will pop straight up. Don't forget, we are also still collecting for the National Autistic Society if you want to be involved in that, because autism is a massive thing. It affects so many people, and it'd be great for you guys to just to help them out. 100% of your donations go to the charity, and it's just a big thing. It's a big thing for me. I need you guys to do it. Shout out to Ames as well, and out to Annie as well, locked in, not easy. Welcome along. So if you want to donate to the GoFundMe, all you have to do is head over to the page. Once again, that's facebook.com/the Demonologist UK. Hit the GoFundMe link at the top of the page. Donate. I promise you it's 100% safe, and 100% of your donations go to the cause. Now let's get on with tonight's show. We're going to bring on Mr. Dr. Cal Cooper. But first, you know how it goes. You know how we like to do this. We like to do things properly here on a Demonologist. So welcome along.
Thank you for having me. I thought there was going to be some sort of big I like that intro. That was awesome. I thought there was going to be something where you'd found things about me and there's a sort of back kind of narration to he's done this and he's done that. And
I did do that a couple of times for the guests, but then I got accused of Facebook stalking, so I stopped.
Oh.
No, it's great. It's great to have you on, Joe. I've been really looking forward to this chat. I saw you live with Jane and Neil, and also with Jacqueline Dixon as well. And the stuff he was talking about, it just blew my mind. Bear in mind, I'm a full out believer, and you even made me sit there and question certain things. I was just like, wow, this guy's done so much. So, I mean, thank you so much for taking time to come on.
Pleasure. Thanks for keeping up with me. I get so kind of all over the place with all different things that I'm going on. So I appreciate kind of being hounded for these things and reminded. Otherwise, I forget. And I enjoy doing them so much. So I appreciate the fact that you've stuck with me and you wanted me on. So thank you very much.
No, it's great. It's great. I mean, so you're a professor, aren't you? You do teach lectures. I think it's at Nottingham University, if I remember rightly.
No, so neither. I'm not a
okay.
professor. I'm not that status yet. That's something I'm working towards. I'm hoping this year I'll be an associate professor. So
Brilliant.
You've got a hierarchy in the university. So you can have associate lecturers and graduate teaching assistants, and they're people that might not have doctoral status, a full research degree where they've stuck with a research project, a particular question for 3 years or so. That gets challenged, it gets examined. They've done several studies on one particular thing, and they're an expert of that particular niche. And eventually that grants them the title through whatever they've done, a medical doctorate, a philosophy doctorate, education doctorate of doctor. And that's the sort of the main kind of belt, really, to say you are an accomplished and grounded researcher. You know how to conduct research to that good standard where you could supervise others and bring them up to that standard. Beyond that, though, is someone who's so engaged in it over a long period of time. They've got a lot of research outputs. They bring in a lot of money through research grants, and they've got a good track record. That's when you can start to get the university to recognize you in the UK for professor status. So usually professors are the kind of heads of research within their department. So I'm working towards it. In America, though, most people that are lecturers are just termed professor. So the title doesn't have that kind of seniority over there and in some other places of the world. So a lot of people get termed professor when they're not even a doctor. But in the UK, you have to be doctor first and then you become professor. And I'm based at the University of Northampton. So even though I live in Nottingham, I work for the University of Northampton.
See, this is why I need to stop just like looking into people's Facebooks and actually be sociable and just ask questions.
It's confusing. I mean, the two Nottinghams, well, the two Nottinghams, the Nottingham and the Northampton, especially their logos as well. It gets very confusing because there's
Yeah.
a few universities that have got the U's and the N's in and stuff like that.
Mm. Yeah. So the main reason I got you on tonight, I wanted to get, because your field is parapsychology, isn't it? It's people deem it as like the greatest skepticism when you're a parapsychologist, but I wanted to get your views on things that I've dealt with over my 9, 10 years of being a demonologist. I mean, there was an article in the paper just printed this week about a South African boy that's just gone through an exorcism, and he ended up dying from it, and you hear about this sort of stuff and you think, oh, people really do take it to a extreme. So what's your sort of take on possession and exorcisms and that from your research?
We were just talking about it for a panel discussion for BBC Radio Northampton. We were doing roundtable discussions on parapsychology, and poltergeist was the latest one that we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about the psychology of the poltergeist agent when there is one involved, and there isn't always in poltergeist cases. But we talked about the suggestibility that's involved, the religious background, the peer groups, the society, the culture that those particular people grow up in. So we mentioned The Exorcist, and then we mentioned how that had originated from a young boy. I've forgotten where he was originally based. It certainly wasn't the United States, but
It was
he had
Germany.
was it? I
Yeah, it
completely
was
forgot where
Germany.
that all originated from, but he got scratch marks and things like that. It
Yeah,
was very much like Elena Zugan, the Romanian devil girl who was investigated in the 1920s by Harry Price. She'd have bite marks, scratch marks, things like
yeah,
that appearing. And to some extent, you've got to question how much is it the kind of trickster thing going on, and it's just children playing along, but it could also get mashed with something that they can't explain themselves.
mm-hmm.
Religious influence as well, when they actually have some
Yeah,
awareness of what they're told through religious scripture are evil spirits and demons, and this is playing on their psychology. And I think it's important to remember that just the power of positive thinking or even negative thinking is extremely powerful on how this impacts on your behavior, your own
mm-hmm.
health and well-being, and also how it can actually turn on your health as well. I mean, we talk about placebo effects in medicine,
Yes,
and how you can take certain things and be told it's something and it does make you feel better when actually you've had the sugar pill, you've had the
yeah,
placebo effect. But there's also the nocebo effect as well. So placebos, I will help you; nocebos, I will harm.
yeah,
And usually, when people go through trials for placebos, they are told of the genuine drug that's mixed in, what its known side effects are:
yeah,
hair loss, impotency. What else could we go through? Constipation, sleepless nights, you name it.
yeah,
Most of the time, when they do these trials, about 45% of people would take on some of these negative side effects because they're
mm,
aware that the drug that they've taken has the potential to cause it.
yeah,
So, negative thinking through anything from religious scripture and thinking about the worst case things and what could potentially happen to you, through to being involved in medical procedures, it has a lot of involvement in the power of the mind and how this can have a physiological effect. And I think even Dr. Leo Rookaby, who's one of our fellows at the University of Northampton, he's also the editor of the Society for Psychical Researchers magazine.
okay,
He's very interested in a lot of history of psychical research and anthropology, and he's looked at this in various shamanic cultures and tribes. And there was this whole process that he talked about once at the University of Greenwich called giving people the bone, which was
yeah,
more or less a death sentence, this death thing of passing it over and people just curling up and dying on the floor on the spot, with how
mm,
influential that had been to particular cultures. So whatever you want to label it as, demonic spirits and things like that, it's, for me as a psychologist, it's more so how much of an impact can influence have on you, especially when it's mixed in with many other things.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been dealing with a case recently where I feel that hysteria and autosuggestion has played a massive part in what is actually happening. It's almost as if like they're creating, it's almost like creating a scene. Do you know about how where you have these things on films and on these programs where they play that sort of spooky music to sort of build the suspense? And I mean,
Hmm.
I bet you come across that a lot in your research, how hysteria and autosuggestion plays a massive part in everything. And what people don't understand is with demonology, it does that. If I tell you you're going to go into a room and in that room there are 5 witches waiting for you, and they're not very nice. Your brain is automatically decided what's going to happen before you get in that room, because I've automatically suggested it to you. I mean, does auto suggestion and hysteria play a big part in a lot of the cases that you've dealt with?
Not particularly hysteria, but certainly when I've looked into haunting investigations, autosuggestion, and when I've been invited along to public events of ghost hunting, which are a far cry from how actually investigating hauntings is like. And when I mention public events, I mean just replications of what we see on television. The lights being turned out, infrared vision, and stuff like that, and doing live EVPs. It's got nothing to do with how data is actually collected. When it comes to hauntings, it's just pure TV portrayal. And then unfortunately, everyone now does this and says we're doing an investigation, blah, 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 blah. Got nothing to do with it, I'm afraid. For me, I find it, I sit there biting my fingers or just cringing, saying, can anyone just listen for a second and just look at how psychical research has been doing this for a long time? But people then suddenly, let's get out the glass moving, or let's do a bit of table tipping and stuff like that. And, mixing in early spiritualist techniques with what they consider to be a live investigation and serious science as far as they're concerned. Not that it ever goes anywhere, it never gets written up and published, or challenged in any way. But if you're doing that, if you're doing glass moving, if you're doing the table tipping, or even just throwing things into a room and calling out and stuff, then a lot of auto suggestion can take place. You could do some very, very simple experiments to find out who is the, I'd assume unconscious, but it could perhaps be someone that's consciously doing it, lead in this, who's putting the most pressure on the fingertips and the table. If anything, though, they're excellent examples of anomalistic psychology, where we can just say, we're not gathering any data here whatsoever that would suggest an anomalous effect going on, but certainly a lot of things put together that shows how people can think they're having a paranormal experience, when actually there's so many factors of psychology we're already fully aware of that perfectly explains what's going on here. So that's where the auto-suggestion would take place in many of those events.
Yeah. I mean, something that I push on the show a lot to a lot of people out there, and I want to get your take on it, is how different things sort of trend in the paranormal world. Like at the moment, I find there's a lot of teams trying the Estes method. It seems to be, I mean, I've tried it myself, and it's an experience in itself. I mean, I don't know if what I was experiencing was paranormal or if it wasn't paranormal. I've had experiences that have solidified what I've experienced in my mind, but that wasn't one. But we're talking about trends like I always use the example of, do you know when The Conjuring 2 come out, and the main demon in that was Valak? The amount of cases that come across my table where people believe that Valak was the demon that's haunting them, it was incredible. So I wanted to get your take on trends within the paranormal. Do you find that there's certain trends that people sort of follow?
I've got a few questions to ask you out there. I mean, first of all, can you fill in a gap in my information bank? Do you know where the Estes method has originated from? Why is it termed as such?
I remember reading something about is it Elena Blavatsky? She was around. I think she was around just after Aleister Crowley. I think she was some mad witch, and I remember reading something about the Estes method and Elena Blavatsky, but I can't put 2 and 2 together. I can't be 100% sure. It's something that I've never actually looked into. I've seen so many teams posting up online about doing this Estes method. Oh, we're going to do the Estes method. I mean, it takes away our senses, and we're tuned into the energies. I mean, I don't know how it works.
I got reminded of this the other day because an associate, I guess, I did the TV show Paranormal Captured for the Christmas special, just gone. And it was used in that, but I didn't hear this term Estes method. I just knew what it was elsewhere. And I heard it again only a few days ago because of it being used again in this way. And I thought, oh no, this is where people are then seeing it on TV and they're coming. If for anyone listening, if you've heard of it, it's not the Estes method. It's not new. This has originated from psychology and parapsychology. It's called the noise reduction model. It was pioneered by someone called Chuck Honiton or Charles Honiton. It's been used for many, many years, and it's more commonly known as the Ganzfeld method. And noise reduction is essentially taking away your ability to see. Often within Gansfeld, though, it's eye shields, so you might have a red haze going through your eyes, and that's it. And you're listening to static, but the static becomes nothing. You don't really hear it. It's trying to actually cancel out your ability to hear as well. There's no way you could take away the senses. I heard that as well in it. I said, no, trust me, as a psychologist, that doesn't work.
Right.
That's not happening. You are reducing, or you are causing some deprivation. You're not getting rid of them, though. And what
No.
you're doing is then starting to make the mind panic a little bit that you've taken them away.
Yeah.
So you get heightened senses elsewhere, but then the two that you are kind of reducing are starting to try and fill in as much information as they can do. Yeah, I've started to see a trend of this, and it annoys me a little bit that, you know, there's a lot of misinformation then spreading into the general, what do you want to call it, ghost hunting community, or whatever. People that watch the TV see this and then they want to go out and do it. It's got no. It's got nothing to do with that. To be honest, Gansfeld belongs in the lab. And if you want to get involved doing lab-based research like that, you can even set up a Gansfeld in a shed at your home if you want to do it, write up the research properly. Anyone can do it. It's just we have the money through grants at the universities to have electromagnetically shielded rooms to then do a Gansfeld in them. We tried this a few times to do it in haunted locations. Steve Parsons and Dr. Ann Winsper were the first people with parascience to really start to try and use the Gansfeld in haunted locations to try and just see if someone's in it, can you actually come out with specific information about the location? But how I've seen a few people do it in these shows, it's more saying, oh, someone's touched my back and I can hear someone suddenly shouting help. And what use is that? What are you actually gaining from that? I mean, why not just push you down a dark hole with your eyes shut? You'll experience all kinds of things. Of course you will. I mean, go back to the 1950s when we were looking at just generally what does sensory deprivation do to us, our psychology, and getting rid of light. We have time distortion. We don't know what day it is if we've been in there for several days. It can start to do things to our sense of awareness and many things. There's a brilliant film that started off all the flotation tank kind of interest called The Mindbenders from 1963 with Dirk Bogarde. And that's a classic example of showing if you stick someone in a deprivation situation, in that case it was a large tank of water and they were in like a diving bell suit suspended in the middle. It sent people crazy to be in there for a long time. But for a short period of time in a very unthreatening environment, it's just like keeping someone between sleep and awake, which we call the hypnagogic state. It's very pleasant. It's very peaceful, especially if you know there's someone on hand to make sure you're okay. And what we want to know is you have loads of imagery as you start to go to sleep. You even have that thing where your body's checking that you have gone to sleep and you think you've dreamt you've kicked a curb or you've fallen out of a tree and your arm suddenly does that, your leg kicks and your heart races. That's great, though. That imagery is brilliant. That's where you get the most creative ideas from as well. But we want to know, where's that imagery coming from? What use is it? And could it relate to targets? So the Gansfeld can instantly induce this. So it's not the Estes method. It's simply the noise reduction model. And it's come from parapsychology. If ever you speak to other people doing this, please correct them. And anyone listening, please correct them and say, it's not that. It's been dramatized. It's been... Please quash it before it starts to spread like wildfire. And it's another thing that parapsychologists are having to re-educate the community on, you know, haunting investigations and many other things. There's so much misinformation out there. It's painful.
I will make sure I correct people. I mean, with me, like I've looked at stuff like the old Victorian seances where they used to use red lights. I don't think if that sort of applies to the whole Gansfield method, because you said about a red mist. They used to say that the red light sort of increased spiritual energy. They increase like the flow of energy through the room. I mean, I'm one of these believers in old school is the best school. I mean, there's a lot of times where I've dealt with cases where I've used ancient Egyptian rituals where they used to use citric acid to neutralize negative spirit threats. So I'm a massive believer in old school was the best school. And when you sort of mention like the Gansfield, it just reminds me back of the Victorian seances where they used to use the red lights. That sort of, am I on the right lines here?
Well, for the seances, they'd use anything from candles to red lights, and it was just something that would be unthreatening, and it came with the territory of them believing that spiritual activity was happening in dimly lit conditions, and so it was the situation in which the spirits preferred to operate. And that was from their opinion. I mean, if you look at surveys anyway of people's reports of anomalous phenomena, it's generally early hours in the morning or late afternoon. And many years gone by before electric lighting, or as it was just coming in, these would be the times of day when people might be at home the most, and they start to recognize these things. They're spending more time at home anyway. And then certainly more towards Christmas, when we've got, shorter days going on, the darkness was more prevalent in the home. And so shadows cast on the walls from candlelight and so forth, they're thinking, well, this is how the spirits operate. These are their ideal conditions. When actually there's a lot of reports of people seeing apparitions and many other things in perfectly good daylight conditions. But translated through to the seances, and when it comes to then Gansfeld, it's not for those reasons at all. I mean, that they wanted something that allowed people to have, when they've got this eye shield on, to still look through it, but have a field of vision. So whatever they're thinking while still awake, trying to keep them in that balance, projects forward onto this white of the eye shield. And so they originally tried a blue light, but people felt it had a sort of a very cold feeling to it. So while sat in the condition for an hour, it would affect them in a way of just feeling a bit chilly. They get blankets and it's a warm room, but still it has this psychological effect. So when they tried red, it creates a nice pink haze. And it's just effectively through a red light bulb in a lamp that's close to them. So it's still warm from the heat of the lamp. But it's like when you're on holiday and you lay on a beach and you're in the direction of the sun, but you shut your eyes and you can see through your eyelids how that light shining on your eyelids creates a pink haze and pink field of vision with your eyes shut. You're kind of seeing that kind of reflection through your eyelid. And so it looks like that. It's just for the calming effect. People are very relaxed when they see that particular color, and that's the only reason.
Okay. Well, we've got a few comments from we've got a really good question actually from one of the listeners. But Ames just stuck up. She said, "Hope you're well, Cal. It's great to have you on the Gifts and Gadgets show a while back."
So, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for having me then.
Izzy, this is the question I wanted to ask you. She's written up. What would you suggest attempting to gain less subjective and more accurate evidence to the existence of the paranormal?
It depends what we mean about the existence of the paranormal. I always find the word paranormal a really dirty word because it's misused so much. There's a lot of misconception about it, and it's still a word now that makes a lot of people go, ooh, and recoil. We try to use other words like anomalous or exceptional experiences. I think anomalous is best because anomalous is used across the board in all sciences. It just means something's going on that we've identified, but we just don't know its processes. Paranormal instantly makes us think about films and UFOs and ghosts and sheets and things like that, when we could be talking about it like we are now in a serious manner, but it's for the people that don't know. When we're using that term, they don't really quite understand what we're talking about. And then there's also the idea that paranormal is this thing that exists in of itself, something that will never and can never be explained, which isn't true either. So I suppose it actually, my response to your question depends on what do you mean, in what setting are we looking for evidence of an anomalous effect, and what kind of anomaly are you suggesting? So if you give me a place and what kind of anomaly we're looking for, I can give you an answer.
Right, Izzy, so there we go.
Get back to me.
No, they're all popping up now. I just wanted to get your take on something actually, because I've had a lot of trolling on Facebook because I've adopted a good friend of mine. Yeah, a friend of mine.
No, it's not nice. It really shouldn't happen, stuff like that, and it is terrible here.
Especially when I'm literally just giving an opinion. But it's fine, if people are trolling me, I know I'm doing something correct, so I'm happy with that. I'm completely happy with that. So I adopted like a theory from a friend of mine called Ben Winfield. He's a demonologist as well, on orbs. Now, the way he explained it to me and the way sort of I've adopted it, that is the orbs, obviously, if we're looking at spirits in general, they are emitting their own electromagnetic frequency, their own sort of energy. So when you see these orbs that fly across the screen and they're just going in one or they're moving direction or anything like that, they're not orbs, it's just dust. If it was going to be a spirit orb, it would be pulsating because it's creating its own energy field. I mean, what's your take on orbs and how do you look at them?
I don't. In all honesty, if you want my complete honesty and professional opinion on it, it was hyped up by TV because of that well-known show that started talking about ghost hunting.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. No idea.
And a lot of kind of ideas behind it. This is an orb. This is the start of a ghost manifestation. Well, okay, what do they all form together and create a person? Do they eventually? Thousands of them. I've never seen that. No one's ever reported that. They look on any manual of a camera, or most of them, and they will tell you what an orb is. Photographic experts have been aware of them. Makers of cameras have been aware of them for a long time. Moisture, fibers, insects. if we want to just stick with the dust particles, if you've ever had a light coming through the window during the day, you've patted the pillows and stuff like that, there are billions of fibers in the air. They're going in your eye right now, you're breathing them in, they're coming off your clothes, there's dead skin, there's all sorts. It only takes one of those to be in the right view of the camera at the right time, to be reflected off of the infrared, the flash, reflected off of something else, and you could be focusing way over there, and here is the lens of the camera, and actually that particle is just here, and yet you're trying to take a picture over there, and it appears as this orb. And people say, yeah, but it responded to my questions and my answers and stuff, and it went left and it went right, and air currents in the room, coincidental. There are so many. I'm sorry, it's not worth the time of day. It really isn't. They are photographic anomalies. If they started to really do something, they would act uncharacteristically, and we would get something new. But people trying to put some sort of sense to something that's random hasn't really achieved anything. There are 2 really good papers that Steve Parsons put out to try and really knock it on the head, and I think they came out in Anomaly and then the Paranthropology Journal as well. And if you want to really, if people are really kind of keen on their orbs, and they want to do more kind of tests of it, there was even early studies by ASAP where they were throwing cinnamon into the air and all kinds of different things, flour, just to look at what the different effects look like on camera of different particles. But Steve was using a 3D camera, which, if you've used one, they've got 2 lenses that are only millimeters apart. And so if you have got that one thing, be it an insect or whatever that has reflected, if you have got that, then it won't appear in the other lens, even though it's taken at the exact same time, it's millimeters apart. If you start to use a 3D camera and whatever the orb is appearing in both lenses, that is quite interesting, because that would, it's like having someone stood in front of you to take the 3D picture. They should be in both frames if they're a real person. But if you start to get orbs that are acting outside of that kind of photography, that is interesting. So I can link you to that afterwards. I can send you a message with the link, and you can link that onto your listeners and viewers later. Because I think that was an open access paper, so anyone can read Steve's work on that. But orbs, not worth the time. Seriously, it isn't. It's old hat. It was TV hype. It got kind of brought up. We all suddenly became aware that everyone was interested in it, so we tried to knock it down as soon as it came up. There's so much more stuff to be interested in and pay attention to than that. There really is.
100%. I mean, I agree with you 100% on that. I've always been someone, when people send me pictures, they go, "Oh, what do you think it is?" It's dust. I mean, it always still freaks me out to this day, the fact that what I'm seeing in this picture is somebody's dead skin. It always makes me feel a bit like icky.
You're breathing it in and all sorts. I mean, we've been more aware of this because of COVID-19, and so much about the things that we touch, and then we're touching our faces and stuff, and breathing it in, and germs, dust particles, you name it, they get everywhere. And essentially we're covered in filth. I mean, people, when they used to go to London Underground many years ago, and London was more of a smoggy place, you could come out the Underground and blow your nose and it would be grey, because the amount of stuff that you're breathing in. And it's a 24-hour cleanup on London Underground. When you're stood on the platform, the through draft that it creates from the trains, the amount of hair that comes off your head, skin particles. They have people employed on London Underground called fluffers, not in the sense that most people know of fluffers, but they go down onto the track, and when it's turned off, and they go and pick the hair particles and dead skin out of the track. They have bags of this stuff after one night of it, and that's it. And so they have to do that. It's a dirty place, and so when you go on there, I always feel dirty for having gone on London Underground, and that was before we were constantly hand sanitizing and things like that every time we touch things. So hopefully now people will be a bit more aware of that. When you're touching handrails and stuff like that, just make sure wherever you're going, you're washing your hands and you're keeping clean, and just be wary. There is dirt and dust everywhere.
Yeah. Izzy's put up, she said, if I felt you were going to ask something for more specific, so how about the spirit activity, the existence of ghosts in the sense of human souls? So I think that was the relation to the first question she asked.
Oh, okay, I'll try and work with that. So let's say you're talking about that in the sense of someone's reported a house that over a long period of time someone's seen a particular apparition walk up and down the stairs. How'd you be more objective with that? Well, you could turn to a number of classical researchers, from Harry Price through to Andrew Mackenzie and Tony Cornell. First and foremost, you go in and you'd interview the immediate owners or residents. You talk about their experiences. I do a bit of historical research. I'd look into local history and see if it's listed in even any of the local writers' guides on hauntings. If you go to most local libraries, local writers over time have had their own pamphlets in there and stuff like that, stuff that never really got wide publication. But the local reads are fantastic. I've got loads over here of, Ghosts of Sussex and Ghosts of Nottingham, and all local writers, and they're just piddly little 15-page things, but they're great because they were often just interviews and very sincere kind of reports and experiences. So check that, check the history of the property, and then if you've got the chance and the ability to do so, with it being a haunting type phenomenon, you can do field research. Live there with the people if you can. If you can't, try and at least spend long periods of time there and keep coming and going. If there's particular times in which they say that they report it as well, you can set up cameras and also things, originally they were using things like threads across the stairway to see, well, if an apparition is walking that path, will it disrupt it in any way? Has it got any particular physical presence? Am I even seeing anything as an investigator?
Yeah.
Those things that you do, and the main thing is you've got your pen, you've got your pencil, you've got your notepad. You're making documentation of every time you've gone in, every time you've sat there and just observed the stairs for a long period of time. Every time someone has said, oh, something's just happened, I felt written. All of these things, even though they might seem mundane and minute, they all add to the initial story that you've gone in and tried over a period of time to conventional explanations for this. You've tried to observe the stairs. You've tried to capture anything as best you can based on the eyewitness statement as well. In terms of hauntings, that's the best thing you do, because you can't take it into a lab, but the best you can do is try and take at least lab ways of thinking or critical thinking, try and rule out things as you can that could cause people to think they're having this experience. And once you've done that, are you going to experience it yourself at all? Can you relate to it anyway? And making your own notes, your own personal diary, could start to shed light on some conventional things you might not have even initially thought about. So just off the top of my head with that example there, that's the best thing in that instance, I could suggest. And then we are a far cry away from this idea of proving the existence of souls going on after someone dies. We need to leave that well over there and deal with all this immediate stuff first of what do we already know? What can we see? What can we explore? What can we find that fits? And if it doesn't fit, how far can we rule it out? Okay, so now what are we left with? So all this kind of sifting process of what do we know? Let's get all that wheat from the chaff, see what's left. And then when we have got what's left, let's deal with that. And now we've got to do a bit more sifting as well. It's a long-winded process, and often a good haunting investigation, looking into people's accounts of ghosts and other things, if it's done right, it takes a long period of time. Again, think of those TV shows. We're going to discover this in 24 hours. Can we prove it? No, you can't. You ain't going to do it 4 hours, and you certainly ain't going to do it running about in the dark. So
100%.
no, that you need to spend time with it. People have been living in that house for years. They might have even been reporting this kind of phenomena and other residents for decades. So you need to also give it its due and respect and spend that time as well if you've got the opportunity to do so. Don't then think about any other location. Try and spend your time with that one location and dedicate yourself to it. Harry Price did with Borley Rectory, and many other researchers did with many other locations as well. Maurice Gross and Guy Playfair, 2 years at Enfield, and many others. If you've got a case, if it's live, something's happening, people report it regularly, stick with it if you've got the opportunity do so. Give it its due, give yourself the self-respect, make those notes, write it up, and then start to think, can I form a report out of this? Can I have it challenged? How good is it as an actual, even though nothing happened as I was there, still it's a good report because you've gone in, you've observed, you've tried to document and understand.
100%. I've always said from the days when I've been investigating that you need to. I've always said, like, it's hard to explain the way I think because those things go through my mind at the same time. But the greatest way of spreading knowledge is storytelling. If we all tell our own little stories, it's the original way of gaining knowledge is through storytelling and talking to each other and talking to other people. And like you just said there, if you've got a case, and the best thing to do is to interview the people that have had that experience to gain the knowledge from their storytelling. And I mean, it's a great way to think of it. Annie's saying perfect answer. Considering my vagueness, thank you very much. So,
You're more than welcome.
I mean, it's great. I mean, so many more questions I need to ask. We've just got to go to a quick ad break. So we're going to pop over to the quick ad break, and then on the other side, we're going to do a couple of little fun things that we do on here that's quite funny, and get some more questions because there's a couple more questions to get on with. But just going to go into a quick ad break, and then we'll see you guys on the other side.
we interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
And we're back on the other side, just like that. I really have to shorten that down. So I'm going to work on that over the next coming weeks. But yeah, we're joined by Dr. Cal Cooper tonight. We're talking parapsychology. We're talking something a bit different from what we normally talk about, which is quite cool. Now, I wanted to get onto a question that I've been wanting to ask you. I tried to stick it up on Jacqueline's show, but the internet went all funny. I wanted to get your take on like these historic hauntings, these hauntings that are reported over and over again, like the Grey Lady at Raynham Hall in Norfolk, or I think there's like the Anne Boleyn ghost, the Tower of London.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's your take on these? Do you not, if there are hundreds, thousands of people reporting the same sighting at the same spot, does that not sort of add up to that massive amount of corroborated evidence? Is that not the sort of data that sort of builds up over time?
I think those ones are more so historic interest, where the story's carried it further than the actual anomaly has itself, because we certainly don't hear regular reports of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, even though we're familiar with the original reports, and then also the fantastical photograph that originally came out that's been looked at for many years, and no one has the original slide plate, so it's hard to really tell what was going on because no one's got the original, or at least no one knows where the original is. And then all the other ones, even stuff that's going on at Hampton Court Palace and so forth. Newstead Abbey is just down the road from me as well. And even though sometimes for charity events they do ghost hunts, and they'll certainly mention the ghosts on tours and stuff, or through to Hardwick Hall with the blue bedroom and a grey mist that's reported in there. It's not overly regular in its occurrence, not so much that we kind of get the reports, but you get ones that are mass reports, like the Marianne apparition at Zeitnan in Cairo, where thousands of people say that they've seen it over time, and there could be masses of people outside the church actually saying they can see it on the roof, and people have taken photographs of it and things like that. That's got a lot of air of skepticism around it, because it's also more a religious-based miracle and questioning, what's going on actually in the church building and things like that. What's being placed on the roof. But that has happened. There's been brilliant collective cases, as in multiple witnesses to a singular apparition that have been witnessed over time. One of my favourite ones was at Drury Lane Theatre.
I was just about to mention that.
Yeah,
is that the one with the cast on the
cast on stage and seeing it go through the stalls, and everyone stopped and kind of had a look at each other, thinking, what on earth did we just see? I love those instances, even if it's just two people and they're seeing the apparition from, the apparitions in the middle and they're at either side. You get some unique instances where, when you hear the eyewitness report when they were separated, they say, "Well, I saw it face on." Well, I saw it face on too. So no one saw the back of the head. It shows the interesting psychology behind it, that if you're having this group experience and someone's generating it, then you're also seeing what you expect to see. Is that why we have clothes added to ghosts as well? Because it's surely got to be our psychology filling in the gaps of our perception, because if we're talking about this having something to do with survival, well, your clothes wouldn't survive. Technically, though, your skin wouldn't either, or anything like that. It would just be something. It would be a massive something, maybe not even something that you could see, because we'd be boiling it all down to something electrical. If consciousness is sustaining in some form, or at least pockets of it, for someone to witness something. I mean, this is really getting into very kind of technical theories that aren't substantiated at all. They're just ideas about, well, what if?
Yeah.
But since people do report apparitions and they do have these experiences, why the clothes? Why the face on view when you've got multiple witnesses from different angles and things like that? But also we have some of these instances of objective presences where it can cast shadows, or stood by a window or a mirror and it creates a reflection that can be seen as well.
Yeah.
Those are unique. So I appreciate what you're saying about the the long periods of time, the ones that are well-known hauntings and stuff like that. But I'd like, if some places claim that they've got that and their apparition, their ghost, their whatever at whatever location is still being reported to this day at a good level, we'd like to know about it. Because it doesn't seem to get to the right sources to say it's happened this week again, and you know what, next week chances are we'll get another 2 people. The guest book is constantly filling up with people saying that they saw that man sat in the chair in the corner. Really, that often? And if it is genuinely happening, great. We want to know about it, because that's fantastic. Especially if these people aren't familiar with the building, they haven't spoken to each other, they're not aware of it. It's only after they had the experience they realised it was something very unusual. Added to, well, let's also find out how many people report that are aware of it as well. So that suggestibility and expectation is already there.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Because if it's like Chinese whispers, when things get passed down, these historical hauntings become public knowledge. People will. It's like we was talking before about the auto suggestion. It's already there. So, I completely understand what you're saying. I don't know who put this up because I can't see it. I normally have the chat on my phone at the same time. But what do you think about the wax hands at Arthur Finney College? I had privilege of holding them a few years ago now.
I know the Arthur Finney has a few items. I don't know if specific wax hands are some further examples of Frank Kluski. You could clarify if those are the ones that they particularly hold, because I know that the other wax hand molds are held at the University of Cambridge Library, where the Society for Psychical Research archives are, and then also the other ones are in Paris, where the original investigations took place. If we're talking about Kluski's production of them in seances, they were fantastic. Dr. Zofia Weaver did a book on it. What did she call it? It was something Realities. If you look up her name, she wrote a book on him only a few years ago that was published with White Crow Press. And people were holding his arms and his legs, the researchers involved. These were psychologists and physicists, and these were semi-lit conditions. And they would say every 5 minutes, I'm holding his left arm, I'm holding his right arm, I have my left leg over his right leg, and so forth. And they keep reporting it to the group that, he's being held. So this isn't someone tied down, escaping from their bonds, that they are being held. He reported physical phenomena, the seance room that people witnessed, and also the generation of apparitions. So they said, if you're doing this and you believe you can bring them forward and create a physical presence, what about if we had a go at trying to capture them? Would you be up for that in terms of an impression of them? And he agreed to it. And so they had paraffin wax in a bowl in the middle of the seance room. And when the seances with that took place, people heard stuff being dipped into it, but they couldn't see it. They could see the bowl, they could hear the noise, but they couldn't physically see anything going in. But afterwards, they found that well, great. Maybe he's got a stooge in there, but then these were experimental conditions to some extent. These have been set so they've got control of the room, not frantic. So it's not a stooge in there. He's certainly not escaped from his bonds because he's being held during it. And you'd still think, well, maybe he smuggled them in. Well, if ever you've dipped your finger in wax and then taken the wax off your end of your finger, you know that that's actually a very delicate item. To do that with your entire hand is extremely delicate, and then you can't just smuggle it in your pocket. It will get crushed. They're very, very delicate things. What they were doing afterwards was pouring plaster in so they could take the impressions. And you've even got so much detail as the fingerprints when they come out. Think, well, if it's fraudulent, then it's his own hand, isn't it? The fingerprints and the hand size will match his. They were different. They were children's hands, sometimes were ladies' hands, and sometimes. In one instance, there was a man's face that had a bit of stubble, like I have here, but he had a wart on his lip, and so they got the partial face impression here, which is in one of the bonds that doesn't match phonetically either. Now, one of the experimenters thought, I'm still skeptical of this. I think the molds or whatever's being dipped in, they're pre-molded hands, they're potentially being brought in. And so I think the wax could be, generated outside the lab. So I want to know if it's being generated here and now inside the seance. So before the seance started, he snuck in, he poured in some blue ink. And after the seance was done, they did find that when these seances were done, people were covered in wax, as though the spirits had brushed it off on people on their nice suits and things like that and their tweed jackets. But for this particular seance, people had got blue wax on them. And the molds were blue wax as well. So they'd been generated from inside the seance during the time the seance was taking place. So they weren't smuggled in, they were generated from within. So no one's really explained how or why they were generated. They're still a mystery, and they're very beautiful things to see.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that, because that's the first time I've ever heard of anything like that. I mean, I don't really come across stuff like that when I'm dealing with when I'm reading, like, like the Book of Enoch, or the Voynich manuscripts and stuff like that. That's the sort of stuff that I read. So, but I am going to look into that. That's another question I wanted to ask you, because the chat's going mad with questions for you. We're going to get to them in a minute. What's your take on all like these old grimoires and these old books that have been written? Do you think that they are first-hand experiences that people have experienced, or do you think it's more what's the word? It's more like exploded stories over time, like we was talking about the Chinese whistles, that stuff, like the Voynich manuscript, the Book of Enoch, all the grimoires that were written in the 14th and 15th century. Have you come across them, and what's your take on them?
I've got to be honest, I'm not overly really familiar with them. I mean, I've got as you can see in my own library, I've got
that's what I'm asking
very
you.
old text on psychical research. And some of these, like Lois Levata's work was like some of the original stuff on apparitions and ghosts, and that stems back to 1572. And so a lot of reports of this, and we know over the centuries, even through to ancient civilizations, Egypt, Rome, Greece, you've got people reporting premonitions of the future, apparitions of the dead, and things like that. So they're not the best of corroborated accounts, but they're still nevertheless people that were potentially very honest and sincere in their experiences, having no idea what they're about. Most people in Egypt just thought it was divine intervention from the gods. And most people that could interact with apparitions or have permission to do so in Egypt were magicians, warriors, and priests. But these people are also the ones that were allowed to have access to certain psychedelics, such as opium and Egyptian blue water lilies. So, it goes hand in hand with that. But then that doesn't quash that, they were just having the experience because they're on psychedelics. There's been a lot of really good parapsychology studies looking at ayahuasca, LSD, and many other things, and showing that some people, when they're on these things, or psilocybin, the project of magic mushrooms, they have very good outcomes when it comes to precognition studies, doing studies where they're trying to make accurate predictions about future things. So if you want to tie them down to any ESP study, so it's unlocking something. There was a brilliant book, actually, The Key to Eternity, which was one particular book about Egypt, which was about psilocybin and people on that, how it was creating an altered state of consciousness and giving access to some of this potential extrasensory information, where they're getting this information from. And meditating, Gansfeld, as I said, the Estes effect, or whatever people are calling it. It's not that. It is not that. It's noise reduction. If you're focusing more on these inner thoughts, or there's a way of transitioning them, even through sleep, it's giving you access to stuff that you're not day-to-day thinking about when you're fully conscious, aware of things. So where's that information come from? You can put it to the test. If you've got target set up or something like that, and you've got to try and focus on it when in this state, you can see how well one ties up with the other. So that's essentially, the basis of a parapsychology study.
Yeah, and moving on from what you were saying, I remember I've not read that book, but I remember reading an Egyptian a book that I had. I'm trying to think of the name of it at the same time. I can't remember, but they was talking about that, like you said, they were taking these blue lotuses and they were having conversations with Set and Anubis and people like this. And it's like, wow, and when you were saying about the different experiments and the things that people are doing, I mean, a lot of people's theory is that these sort of meetings that come from the subconscious, the part of the brain that we cannot control. Have there been studies into how the subconscious affects the way that our conscious minds work in the realms of parapsychology?
Well, certainly at the University of Northampton, we follow the premise that psych-inducive states are those of altered states of consciousness. So most of our studies have been geared towards that. Even what you mentioned again there, we know that people that have been on things like ayahuasca, they've reported things like people having wolf heads or various other animal heads. So that rings a bell. So the Egyptians viewed their depiction of their gods, especially if this is coming directly again from interpretations and warriors and so forth, and what we know they had access to. So, you know, perfectly conventional explanations there, but there's a basis of a religion through an experience that we don't understand because they don't have psychologists or scientists.
Yes.
But yeah, you know, we know that even day to day, when people have what we call a spontaneous experience, they suddenly see apparition of Uncle Bob in the corner, or I feel a bit uncomfortable today taking my car journey to work. I don't know why, but you know what? I think I'll call in, say, you know, I'll work later this afternoon or something, and I'll linger at home. And lo and behold, had you gone on that car journey, you would have got caught up in a pile-up. You could have been seriously injured or even killed, or things like that. You know, it's because you were going about your boring, mundane day-to-day stuff. You could have been washing the pots. I was washing the pots when suddenly I knew I had to leave, but I felt uncomfortable and I didn't know why. And I was sorting out some old magazines I've been meaning to clear out for ages, and I suddenly looked up and I saw my Uncle Bob so-and-so who'd been dead for 10 years. There are always stories like I was doing when all of a sudden, you never get. I went along to a haunted location and I sat on that one particular corridor where people have always seen this apparition, and 6 hours went by and finally it appeared for me and gave me a good wave. It doesn't work like that. It does not. If you go around looking for it, then you're in a different state and different mindset, and the people that initially had that experience aren't doing that either. They're living with the building and it just all of a sudden happens. So it doesn't mean to say that it's fleeting necessarily. You could be very engaged with the experience when it happens.
Yes.
They are real world examples of altered states. So when we transition it through to the lab, we can't get things to perform on command. We know it's very difficult with psi-based tasks anyway, or most psychology studies in many ways, especially if you want to get the same effect with a person the next day. We're so delicate in a way. It's like trying to nail jelly to the wall. It's hard to get a consistent outcome for a repeated study with human behavior because we change so much in our mood, any arguments we had one morning, or how waking up the next day, and all sorts of things, kind gestures that happen to you from other people, it all changes you throughout the day. Happiness and many other things goes up and down all the time. So these side effects, if indeed there is such a thing, they're quite fleeting and hard to hold on to as well. But if we can put them in a Ganzfeld, if we do a psychedelic based test, if we're doing a dream studies test, if we're doing something that just alters their perception in some way while they've got focus on something, like what we're about to do with more of our flotation tank research, it's unusual. It seems very special to the person doing it as well. So you've got that nice, you know, making them feel very special. This is an unusual experience, very for it. It'd be fun. But also the condition itself is slightly mind altering. And if you can do that and create a simulation of, well, we are altering their mind, but it's still not a day-to-day kind of circumstance. This is certainly not ecological at all. It's very artificial. Still, how far can we test it? How far can they seem to get something right when all the abilities to do it by normal means are ruled out? And so, absolutely, altered states are something we're very interested in, and they're very much looked at in parapsychology. There seems to be a very good and reasonable link between the two. And again, that goes back to Chuck Honiton. He was the first person who really started to initiate this whole thing. If you reduce the noise, of everything going on around you and just dull those senses and focus more on what's going on here, and try and get that person to talk about more about what these visions and sounds are when they know they're trying to focus on something. Those kinds of studies over time, all the successes and all the failures together, look at them as a whole, which is what's called a meta-analysis, and the effect is pretty good. It's comparable to most psychology studies. In fact, it's pretty better than, that's poor phrasing. It's quite better than a lot of studies as well. It's very much a good competitor. There's good evidence for it.
Yeah. I mean, the questions are coming thick and fast, but I'm going to be a little bit selfish because I've still got things I want to ask, but we will get to the questions. I want to get your take on. I read a book. I think it was written by Gerard Brittle. It was to do with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and it spoke about Lorraine Warren going to UCLA and getting her mediumship sort of confirmed, the testing confirmed. Are you aware of this, and do you know what sort of goes into that? Because I tried to look more into it and I couldn't get any more info, so I wanted to see if I could pick your brains and see if you know anything more about that.
I tried to stay clear from Ed and Lorraine Warren. They don't really come into my domain. I mean, I've written about people like Alex Tannis, for example. I mean, I put together a small book called Conversations with Ghosts that he was trying to do with Carlos Osis at the time, and from what remained, I managed to put it together. And there's a whole kind of appendices section that I put together there on Amityville, and talking about the claims that Ed and Lorraine made about various things. And they wavered from calling themselves demonologists to parapsychologists, and sometimes they would say that. Did you see that then? See, there's just parts I live in a very dusty house. Because it's old. It's very old. It's not because it's not clean.
That's the first manifestation, you know that.
It's an 1800s cottage, so it happens. Look, that was one of billions, but it's a very clean property. They're everywhere. They're all around you. But anyway,
it did do it on cue.
No, it didn't. They make all kinds of claims, and with that, they were saying that Alex Tannis had levitated through the Amityville property and all sorts. I didn't even know that Lorraine claimed mediumistic abilities and things like that. They don't enter into parapsychology. They had no involvement whatsoever. They weren't researchers as far as we're concerned. They were just people that appeared in the media quite a lot and had quite a lot to say in their opinion.
So do you not think there is a way to sort of maybe measure, because obviously this was done for UCLA and the professors at UCLA actually confirmed that this was done. I mean, do you think there's a way you can measure mediumistical abilities in sort of your sort of field of work?
Yeah, I mean, this has literally just come out a few days ago. This is Advances number 10, Advances in Parapsychological Research, with the main editor being Professor Stan Krippner. And one of the latest chapters in here is a meta-analysis of anomalous information reception by mediums, assessing the forced choice design and mediumship research from 2000 to 2020. So, looking at how good is their information exchange in lab conditions. And so people have looked at that. There are ways of doing lab studies. One of the most famous ones was by Tricia Robertson and Professor Archie Roy. And so you're familiar with the idea of a medium that might, go and do a platform demonstration, and they're stood there and they've got a whole audience to work with. Well, what if we have 18 people that are all at a numbered desk, and the medium comes into the room, but they're screened off from all the people sat there, and all they have is a grid system seeing desk 1 through to so many, all the way through to 18. And they're told, well, you've got to read person number 5 at desk 5. And you can have a glance at them through a one-way mirror or something like that, and the medium would then say everything they want to say, but all those people don't get to hear about it. And actually it all gets transcribed, and those people sitting down hear get to read the transcript, and line by line they mark yes or no whether they feel it relates to them or not. Now, if it was general information, you'd expect everyone or a lot of people to actually say that's definitely me, that's definitely me. They found in their study that with the 1 or 2 particular mediums that have already been noted to be very successful, that they were gravitating towards the person correctly, in terms of that person was also the one identifying the most hits, even though neither had had any interaction besides this transcript. They'd also put in their own decoy, where sometimes they would tell someone in the audience, number 11, this reading this time is going to be for you. And so that they know that what's coming is definitely for them. And actually, it's for number 17. And the medium's been told read 17. So one person in there is also preset to think this is for me, so I'm really looking forward to this. And yet still 17 marks the most hits compared to the other person who's been told the readings for them. So that's if you've got a good medium. I mean, that's interesting there, where you're looking at the hits and misses of a good exchange between the information that's coming out, and yet you've separated the interaction, where you could see all kinds of things such as cold reading. So they're just generally picking up on body language of people. I've got a child, a son or daughter who's passed, and actually they're looking out for the person in the audience or people that suddenly go, lean forward a bit. I'll gravitate towards them. Someone nudging a friend, something like that, an eyebrow raised, anything. I've done it myself. I've gone out and been a medium, but I've told people, today I'm going to pretend to be a medium. I must tell you first and foremost, I'm a psychologist, and I don't have any psychic abilities whatsoever. I'm going to use techniques to make you think that I know all about you. And I didn't tell them anything about deceased relatives. I just told them about their homes and their lives. Some people going away in tears and shaking my hand and all sorts, saying, thank you so much. That was so interesting. Not a psychic. I'm not a psychic. Yeah, but what you said there, that was so interesting. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it and you took something from it. but I'm not a psychic, and I'm not in contact with the dead either. I've just told you stuff that you've filled in the gaps for, and you've basically just told me about you, and you've gone away feeling happy about yourself. There's other things as well that you could do. You could do hot reading, just like you said. You could stalk people's social media. People to put too much open personal information on there about the names of their children, photographs of things, particular items of jewelry people might wear, and things like that. And so if you already know those people are going to be at particular events, say a Facebook event's been organized and yet it's a physical location, you could go down the list of people who have agreed to attend. You could get familiar with what they look like, their names of the people. So easy to remember some of those things if you have got a good memory. I've certainly been good at doing stuff like that. And you've already gone along, not using Barnum scripts, you're not using general information, you're not using cold reading, but you're using hot reading. You're going up to someone who you've already researched, and it freaks them out. Amanda, how you doing? It's so good. Is Johnny getting better? He broke his arm recently, did he? Didn't he? Yeah. Oh God, he's getting a lot of pain. It's itching now, quite, and he keeps on resting his arm by the side of the bed like that, or on the all kinds of things like that, and it'll start to get really creepy territory. No, your car registration plate, does it start with? It's all those kinds of things. Too much information, but yes. So on one hand, we know all the various potential conventional techniques. Are mediums being tested in the lab, and are there ways of testing to actually rule out a good medium from, one that's potentially displaying all these other things we're fully aware of, and yet they still go on doing it? Yes, there is. There are ways of separating one from the other. Even then, when we've got the instance where they're coming out with very specific information, it doesn't mean to say that they are contacting the dead. It doesn't even necessarily mean that they're using ESP. Something else might be going on, but it's certainly not going on within the realms of what we do understand. It's something else that we need to learn about. Even mediums such as Eileen Garrett, who founded the Parapsychology Foundation in 1951, by the end of her career, she didn't think she was in contact with the dead at all. She thought that it was a form of telepathy. She thought she was just merely reading the sitters or the people, and it was just she was gaining information from what those people were already aware of in their living, healthy minds. And so it's interesting how, as a medium, she'd gone through that transition of thought as someone fully engaged in and promoting and funding a lot of science on this to try and understand herself and others. And she thought, if you're going to make this claim of being a medium or someone else, put yourself to the test. And she was someone that did consistently.
Yeah, that's great. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've always sort of questioned that whole thing of measuring the mediumships a bit, and you're talking about putting lots of controls in place. You're talking about when you do these experiments to have these controls in place, like you said, putting decoys in to be able to throw that up, because any sort of experiment you do within science, within research, you have to obviously have the control issues, but you also have to have ways in which you can show the negative response as well as the positive, like you said, looking at the whole picture. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that, but unfortunately we've run out of time, and I'm proper gutted because I'm getting right into it here. But I mean, I'd love to have you on the show again, mate. I really would love to have you on the show again. I mean, there's so many questions that they put up on the chat, and I've been selfish and I've not asked them because I had questions.
Save them up, keep a list, and we'll address them first and foremost next time.
I'm definitely going to have you on the show again. It's great to sort of have that change up and to see things from a different perspective. I think that's why I started this show August last year. I want to see things from everybody's perspective, and I want to learn through the age-old storytelling way. So it's been great having you on the show. It's been great to see things from your perspective and learning from your experiences.
Well, thanks so much, and it's been a pleasure chatting to you and hearing all these questions and also some of your experiences as well. And I think that, again, I'll push that main message again. If anything that I've said has corrected things going on in public domains, ghost hunting, things like that, please pass it on and pass on what is the correct information, because there's so much, it's all stemming down from media, and the media's got so much more instantaneous impact, rightly or wrongly, than turning to the scientists, the academics, and the time it takes to actually read and ingest books and then remember it and pass it on. I'm paid to do that. Not everyone is, but let's get the information right. Let's all work together and let's all be on the same track. If everyone's learning the wrong things and going in different directions, it's so chaotic. And then people go, what did he say? That doesn't sound right. Let's pass it on. Let's get the right information out there.
And we've always got to remember now, guys, all the listeners out there, I know this is going to sound really sad, but I've named my listeners, we're all called demos. So for all the demos out there, right, if you come across anyone talking about the Estes method, it's the noise reduction method. Okay, and we're going to correct them.
Noise reduction model.
That's it, noise reduction model, and we're going to correct them because Dr. C said so, right? But yeah, no, Cal, honestly, it's been great having you on. I will message you and we'll arrange another time to get you on the show. It's been mind-altering. It's been great, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and taking time out to do this.
My pleasure. Have a really good Easter weekend, and that's same goes to all of you that have tuned in and listened. Have a good, relaxing weekend, and eat some chocolate, but not too much.
Yeah, not too much.
Stay healthy.
Okay. Cal, take it easy, mate. Thank you again. You have a good Easter weekend.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. So, guys, I mean, wow, that was a definite eye opener. I can't. I'm stunned, absolutely stunned. Don't forget, guys, as well. Yeah, if you do want to catch any of the videos, if you want to watch the interview back with Dr. Cal Cooper, it'll be available hopefully from tomorrow on the channel. All you have to do is head over to www.facebook.com/The Demonologist UK. I'm going to try and get it up there next week. On the show, let's have a look who we've got next week on the show. Next week we've got Estes Ghost Hunters on the show. We're going to have Russ Old on the show. We have these guys are amazing. This is where I started my career off. I remember going out with these guys on my first ever investigation. So we're going to get Russ on. We're talking to Estes Ghost Hunters, what they've been up to. Don't forget, guys, check out Dr. Cal Cooper on Facebook. If you have any questions, stick them over to me. I can ask him and we go from there, or we'll save them up because I'm going to definitely get him on the show. But my time's up. So don't forget, next week, Essex Ghost Hunters. If you do want to catch any of the videos, you know where to go. Once again, guys, take it easy. Have a really good Easter weekend. Enjoy the bank holidays while it lasts. Take care, guys. It's been a Demonologist UK. Damon Penny signing out. Take care.